Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. We chose to pre-record this session called Natural Capital Protocol Webinar. We're not live today because the current Natural Capital Protocol is open for comment, and we wanted to sneak this webinar in to give everybody a bit of perspective and context for the Natural Capital Protocol, and also provide you an opportunity and enough time to comment on its development, which is still currently open for comment, and the individuals speaking after are going to address this. So I'd like to move right along. The context here, CBSR has been a member of the Natural Capital Coalition. We're very interested in understanding how businesses will ultimately use the ideas of natural capital and ecosystem services to better inform business decision-making, and how that will lead to a more sustainable Canada for all of us. And so today we've amassed a really great group of people to help provide a bit of context and background. We have with us today Sara Wilson, who's a principal consultant with Natural Capital Research and Consulting, and CBSR Associate Agnieszka, who's been very passionate about the Natural Capital Protocol and has been watching the development for us for a number of years, actually. So they're going to provide a bit of background and context on the draft for consultation and the Natural Capital Protocol, which is a rather weighty tome of information, so they're going to help cut through some of that for us and give us some perspectives. And then we're going to be joined by Barb Steele, the Managing Director at the Natural Step, who's going to give us an update on the current Natural Capital Lab that they are running here in Canada. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Agnieszka first. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Steve. So you've done a great job introducing the content of the presentation. So I will not go much into detail on the agenda slide, but we can perhaps just get into the background and the case for better measurement and management of natural capital, just to provide some context to what we are doing, and then we'll get into explaining the protocol. So perhaps if we can just go right into slide 3. So just before we begin providing an overview of the protocol, we just wanted to go over some definitions and important points. So the definition that the Natural Capital Coalition uses for natural capital, what is it? It's a stock of renewable and non-renewable natural resources that combine to yield a flow of benefits to people. And here what we would like to do is just to distinguish between natural capital and ecosystem services, because while natural capital refers to everything, we want to make that distinction that tangible natural capital assets such as timber and minerals are often measured and at least their market price is known. But ecosystems are more complex, and since they're not traded on markets, they're seldom valued and accounted for. So there's a lot of mismanagement happening there. And also, while there's the more tangible natural capital assets are generally valued, as markets exist for many of them, it does not include their full value or the cost of their degradation. So that's important to keep in mind, and doing a natural capital assessment can provide some insight into that. And now Sara will provide us with some input on the importance of ecosystem services.
So as Agnieszka said, we're critically dependent on our natural capital assets, and these include resources, ecosystems, and the ecosystem services that they provide. Ecosystem services refer to the benefits that nature provides to people, and some of these are more familiar, such as food, and others are more difficult to readily observe, such as water filtration and carbon storage. And so therefore they've often been underestimated or unaccounted for in decision making. So now, as a result of this, we're drawing down on our natural capital, according to the Natural Capital Coalition, at a rate of 50% more per year than the Earth can replenish. And further declines in natural capital have been predicted if businesses and communities continue with business as usual. For example, according to the UN Environmental Finance Report, the cost of pollution and other damage to the natural environment by the world's 3,000 largest companies is equal to 1/3 of their profits, an estimated $2.2 US dollars in 2008. So there's a need to better articulate and capture the natural capital assets, the ecosystem services, and the benefits that they provide to people. And this is why the Natural Capital Coalition has responded by producing this Natural Capital Protocol, which aims to help business improve their planning and decision-making.
And a little bit more about the business case, perhaps. So, of course, there are various drivers depending on the sector and the nature of the business. For example, the access to the quality and quantity of resources, important business inputs such as water or agricultural commodities, whether it's cotton or silk. And understanding that broader risk exposure is really critical to the security of supply, long-term supply chain resilience, so threats to the quality and quantity of supplies due to disease or climate change, rising cost of resources or water treatment costs, reputation, and so on. And an assessment such as a natural capital assessment supports business decisions around operational efficiencies, supply chain substitutions, various cost savings, so definitely a more comprehensive assessment of business value drivers, risks, and costs across the supply chain can provide better insight into strategic decision-making and risk management, and also demonstrate a bit of a stronger link between various financial and non-financial drivers that are instrumental to the overall state of the business. So I think that's important to mention. And perhaps now we can move over to the next slide to give you an idea on the current momentum in this space. So we're not going to get into detail on these initiatives, but we just wanted to let you know that there's a lot of momentum around the world in this space. For example, the Natural Capital Coalition is the multi-stakeholder platform based in the UK that brings together different initiatives and organizations working in natural capital accounting to collaborate on projects related to the integration of natural capital thinking in business. So, of course, one of their key projects is the development of the protocol. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development is strongly involved in the development of the protocol, and they also recently established a natural infrastructure platform for business. There's the Canadian Natural Capital Lab established by the Natural Step Canada, and we look forward to hearing from Barb on the update.
So government is beginning to look at ways to measure natural capital in terms of lands, ecosystems, resources, and the ecosystem services provided to ensure that impacts of human activities and development are accounted for and that the costs are evident by integrating them into decision-making. And natural capital accounting and ecosystem service assessments can provide the necessary information and evidence to mainstream this information into government and business planning and policy. In Canada, there's currently a joint federal, provincial, territorial project underway to develop an ecosystem services toolkit to guide this integration of ecosystem service assessments into policy, legislation, and planning. And similarly, in the U.S., federal agencies have started working through an ecosystem services partnership across agencies to develop also a similar ecosystem services guidebook. And even at the administrative level, the U.S. President recently issued a directive to point federal agencies towards incorporating natural infrastructure and ecosystem services into planning, investments, and regulations. And in some countries, governments have already established national accounts for natural capital, such as Scotland, where they have developed a natural capital asset index, which tracks changes in the extent and condition of their ecosystems. It shows how natural capital can be considered alongside other forms of capital, such as financial capital, and is a measure that assesses the sustainability of the country's economic growth based on the impacts of economic and social activities. This index has has actually shown that the country's natural capital stock declined between 1950 and 1989, and that it's actually increased slightly over the past 25 years. And there's also municipalities here in Canada that are now tracking their natural assets. For instance, Gibson's, a small coastal town in southern British Columbia, has developed an eco-asset strategy with the goal of managing their green space, aquifers, water supply, coastal areas, and these natural assets are providing the town with their natural green infrastructure that includes water flow management for flooding protection, water purification, and natural protection in terms of a seawall. And they're currently customizing this this asset management into a software to integrate natural capital assets into municipality planning. And Agnieszka is going to talk about the corporate initiatives. On to you.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of exciting stuff happening on the corporate front. About 50 companies are actually involved in the Natural Capital Protocol piloting process. So they're actually testing the protocol, various segments of it. If we can move on to the next slide, we can actually have a look at some of the companies that are doing that. And TD is involved in this as well. They're performing valuation work of some of their products, portfolio, sustainability initiatives. Marks and Spencer's is looking at natural capital impacts of sourcing and also participating in the pilot, of course. They're looking forward to linking natural capital accounting and integrated reporting soon. Dow and the Power Grid are involved in green infrastructure, and then there are others like Caring and Novo Nordisk that are calculating a full environmental profit loss account across their operations. So that's quite interesting. And the National Bank of Australia and New Zealand is incorporating natural capital considerations into loans, so looking at things like soil management and other agricultural indicators. So companies are using this the protocol and natural capital accounting in different ways. So they're looking at different impacts, different scopes, in such a way that aligns with their business priorities. So now if we move on to the protocol slide 6, we can quickly go into this and provide some background on the protocol and take you through the stages of it, so that you can hopefully participate in the consultation process. So really the purpose of the protocol is, it's a standardized framework for business to measure and value its direct and indirect impacts and dependencies on natural capital, to enable business to measure the amount or the extent or condition of natural capital in physical terms, and then estimate the importance or relative worth of natural capital in a given context to the business or to people. And evaluation itself can be either monetary or quantitative or qualitative or all of this, all of the above. And the protocol is internationally applicable. It's also applicable to various sectors, and it leverages different methodologies and best practices. So there's a lot of onus on the company to figure out how to use the protocol. It's not very prescriptive, but it's very insightful and quite comprehensive. This is the first draft that has been released. It has been released in November of last year, and the final draft will be available for use in July of this year. So that's quite exciting. So if we move over to the next slide. We can briefly talk about the main stages. So the main stages or phases of the protocol are are framing, scoping, measuring, valuing, and application. So we'll go over that in a little bit more detail very shortly. And in terms of applications, the protocol can be used to assess impacts and dependencies on a product level, on a project level, operational level, different geographies, or the full supply chain. It's not specifically intended for reporting. However, some organizations do choose to report their impacts. And another strong point of this protocol is that it really does help to link non-financial work streams and and encourage integrated thinking to see various synergies in companies. And it's targeted at various decision makers within the company. So now if we move over to the next slide, we can see the various stages of the protocol. So the four main are framing, scoping, measure and value, and application, and then they go into detail. So in the first stage, the framing stage, here companies will outline benefits to their own business of conducting a natural capital assessment. So what is the business case, and what kind of business decisions may benefit from this type of assessment? So in this stage, a business gains a general understanding of its relationship to natural capital, and it's also an opportunity to secure internal support for the assessment. And then in the scoping stage, companies will focus on the objective, the actual scope of the assessment, so whether it's looking at a specific impact or a dependency, an operational boundary. And then based on that, the company will identify its high priority impacts and dependencies. So this stage in general helps organizations solidify their objectives related to natural capital assessments, identify target stakeholders and the benefits. And when identifying value chain boundaries, it's important to consider what's already available, like what kind of baseline data and footprints and exist in the company that can be leveraged, and also what types of limitations the company may be facing in conducting this assessment. And Sara will take us through the next stage, which is the important and exciting one, measuring and valuing, how to do that.
So steps 5 through 8 provide guidance on the measurement and valuations for the impacts and dependencies. In stage 5, a business organization determines what to consider for measuring and valuing regarding impacts and dependencies on natural capital. In stage 6, measure or estimate the impacts and dependencies. It sets out how to select the appropriate measurements and provides examples of a range of potential indicators, tools, and methods for the analysis. And guidance is provided on how to identify indicators, measure the identified impacts, dependencies, costs or benefits, and how to undertake the data collection and estimation techniques that might be necessary. In stage 7, the protocol provides an overview of how external factors affect natural capital, and the relevant considerations needed when tracking the state and the changes in natural capital associated with the business's activities and the types of drivers that are causing the impacts. Stage 8 outlines various valuation techniques and again provides guidance on what types of techniques could be used and are appropriate for different types of impacts. It also provides guidance on determining the significance of costs and benefits of a business activity, and again, the technique for particular types of business. And the next section is apply, so what, Agnieszka.
Okay, so this stage allows businesses to interpret the results and apply them to decision making. So it starts with the interpretation assessments, looking at what actually emerged, what kind of results were generated by the assessments, and then provides guidance on any required validation steps. It answers questions such as what are those costs, how great are the impacts of a given service or product, and how many people do they affect, etc. And then, of course, then it's followed by embedment, and so really incorporating those results into business practices, into decision-making, different processes, and then communicating those results within the company and perhaps outside the company. So it might give, so this stage might give insight to new new metrics, optimizing operational efficiencies, product substitutions, future resource costs. So it really allows the company to think about what are the results and what does that mean to the business and how to take action. And if we can move on to the next slide now, we can briefly talk about the consultation process. So right now, we mentioned that this is a draft report, the Natural Capital Protocol, which is it's a very comprehensive draft. It's quite well done, and the consultation process is in the works. There's lots of different initiatives around the world where members of the coalition are soliciting input from different companies, from various stakeholders on how to better improve this protocol. And this information, the feedback is being fed to the Natural Capital Coalition, who will incorporate the feedback into the report and then release the final version in July. So we'll give you the website information, and then there's two ways you can really do this. You can do it directly, and we'll let you know where to log in and where to provide that feedback, or you can also download the report and send feedback to us, and we'd be happy to gather the feedback on behalf of the Canadian business community or CBSR members, depending on who the feedback is coming from, and provide that feedback directly to the coalition. So if we can see here that the deadline is approaching very shortly, so it's February 26th. If you're going to do it directly, you could you just have to make sure that your feedback is received by 11 a.m. on February 26th. If you'd like to do it through us, then please send us your feedback no later than at the end of the day, February 25th, and then we'll be happy to share that with the coalition. So basically, there are three guides, documents here online, the draft protocol, and there are two sector guides, the draft food and beverage sector guide, the apparel sector guide, and depending on what you're interested in, you can look at all of those and provide feedback on the areas of interest or on the guiding documents of interest. And moving over to the next slide, this is just an example of how the comments are being provided by the users and different stakeholders. So you can read each of the different sections and then provide comments based on whether it's a technical comment, a structural comment, whether it's overarching or whether it pertains to the style. And you can insert the detail here into the little boxes, and the system is very user-friendly and straightforward. So it's you just follow the prompts. And on the next slide, we have the links to the Natural Capital Coalition protocol site as well as the consultation site. So this is where you will be able to access the documents and log into the site for consultation purposes. And once again, the reminder is 11 a.m. on February 26th if you're sending it directly to the coalition, and if you'd like to send feedback to us, then please do that by the 25th of February, by the end of the day. Thank you very much. And now we're looking forward to hearing from Barb on the Natural Capital Lab updates.
Thanks very much, Sara and Agnieszka. That was extremely helpful, and I know we're dealing with a tight timeline on the turnaround of our comments, but understanding that this is a long-term process and there will be additional opportunities to engage on an ongoing basis.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thanks for this great opportunity to give you an overview of something called the Natural Capital Lab, which is an initiative being run out of the Natural Step, but very much in partnership with all those in the sustainability space. My name's Barb Steele, and I'm going to take you through a very high-level overview of the work that we're doing that ends with an invitation to collaborate. So the Natural Capital Lab is basically a large-scale multi-stakeholder collaboration that will be taking place over a period of time that could be as long as 4 years. And I just want to set this up by saying it's a system-level change project. And so we think about these things in terms of what are the issues that we're trying to address, and how will this particular initiative have impact on that topic. So we know nicely from the description in the introduction by Agnieszka and Sara that natural capital is critical to human well-being, and that it's being eroded at a rate that very much threatens our wealth and prosperity here in Canada. The Natural Capital Lab was a piece of work that was underway last year in the form of a discovery. And what we uncovered through an initial piece of research was that there are innovations and knowledge already widely available that are not being applied in Canada. So we set out with a group of people, including Sara and Agnieszka, to better understand the landscape and try to scope what an initiative might look like to address this. We came up with the Natural Capital Lab. It's really aimed to catalyze a movement at the level of field, and has a series of innovations or pilots built into it. And our end goal, the bottom point here, is that business and government leaders will ultimately better measure, manage, and make decisions about Canada's natural capital. So what we did was a piece of research followed by a workshop. What you see here on this slide is some pictures from our day. It was at the end of May at the Brickworks. You can actually see Sara Wilson right here in the first slide to the left holding the piece of paper. And we convened a workshop with about 45 people, and our purpose here was to share back research findings and then work with the group of stakeholders in the room to identify what the best opportunities would be to move forward, and to get some feedback around whether a lab would or would not be useful. So I'm going to just quickly summarize what we learned out of our first phase of work here. We heard 100% support through our research and through the workshop about the need for multi-stakeholder collaboration on this issue. It's obviously a very high-level, far-reaching issue, and certainly not something that any one stakeholder can influence on their own, so a lot of need for collaboration. As mentioned, certainly there's things ready to go that if we apply some energy and resource to, we could quickly adapt and scale. And then the third point here is that what we call field building, and this is really that, awareness around this issue is not that high. Education is required, and engagement is currently needed. I just want to fill in a bit of detail here around what the innovation work streams will look like underneath the Natural Capital Lab. And there's 4, and you're hearing about one in detail today, which is around the adaptation and piloting of the Natural Capital Protocol in Canada. The protocol was launched in a pilot stage in July of this year, and through this consultation that Agnieszka and Sara were outlining, we'll feed then into a revision, and the protocol will be ready for launch in July of 2016. And our aim here with groups like CBSR and Sustainable Prosperity and everyone in the space is to get Canadian companies aware of and engaged in use of the protocol. The second innovation stream under the lab, which will be encompassing many different types of work, will be the piloting of project-based tools. And so this will be a very place-based, issue-specific pilot, which will run around geographies like the Ring of Fire and perhaps some part of the forestry sector, and aim to convene stakeholders where natural capital is already being mismanaged or is under threat, to consider what are the tools that they require to get unstuck. The third innovation stream, we've heard a little bit about this through Sara's introduction, is around fast adapting municipal best practices like the work going on in Gibson's. And the fourth one is really about piloting a system of accounts, and so you could think of this one as put natural capital on the balance sheet. So what you see on this slide is sort of the lab overall with the particular work streams underneath. So we're calling this next stage of work phase 2, and the goal is to improve in Canada the way we measure, manage, and make decisions. And we're suggesting a process that we at the Natural Step call a lab is a good way to go about this. So what the heck is a lab? For us at the Natural Step, we call these types of projects sustainability transition labs, and they are essentially multi-stakeholder collaborations which are aimed at system-level problems. And what they involve is a facilitated process and platform which allows us to bring key actors together to innovate and experiment in a supported way. And in this way, move forward on a system transition. So we also, at the Natural Step, subscribe to a process we call backcasting. And so what you see on this next slide is on the left, in the violet box, the system as we understand it today. And in the far right, in the light blue box, the system as we would aspire for it to be after the transition. And so this really captures the findings of the piece of research that we conducted in 2015. And we essentially took about 50 interviews and then extensive secondary research and boiled it down to these 4 key points, which really represent the challenges in the system in Canada today. And those are that Canadians lack awareness and urgency around this issue, that market signals, in essence, do not exist broadly or for only particular parts of natural capital, that business and government are not widely considering natural capital in decision-making, and that all this adds up to our corporate and municipal and other forms of organizations not being fit for the future. And so what we aim to do over the timeline of the lab, which will bring us to about 2020, is shift that system so that we see much more engagement, market signals, consideration in decision-making, and our important institutions being fit for the future. So what we have here in the yellow box is the lab, and it notes here some of the things that we will do to establish the lab and then support the lab. And then these arrows that you can see across this yellow box represent the 2 levels that the lab will be working at. The first level we call Build the Field, and we know from our other work in sustainability transition labs that there's critical work required at the level of the system or the landscape, or some people might call this the public engagement or public narrative, that we have to pay attention at this level in order to start the shift required. So how we will do this is really capacity building and engagement, which will be designed to support the adaptation or adoption of the innovations through network building with groups like CBSR and drawing together key influencers. And then selecting strategic audiences to reach out through in order to start this broader understanding of the need for transition around how we treat natural capital. And then, so there's this work going on largely through the participants in the lab with support from the Natural Step, lots of training, communication, and engagement. And then underneath that, we see the specific innovation areas that we identified through the research and through our workshop as high potential pilots for us to get involved in. Some of the potential partners, we're currently confirmed and working with CPA, the Chartered Professional Accountants, TD Bank, Cooperators Insurance, and Family Foundation, and Sustainable Prosperity. And then we're seeking other partners. We expect provincial partners and municipalities to also become involved. And these will be partners who have a governing voice in the direction of the lab and provide their networks of support and resourcing to assist the lab. And here's what the process looks like over the 4 years. And again, we've broken this down in the sort of higher level field building and then the particular innovation work streams going on underneath here, and you can see that it is a 4-year time frame, and that we're currently sort of at the beginning of year 1. So we're very much in the recruitment stage under field building, where we are currently seeking technical advisors, partners, participants, funders, and we expect by the end of Q2 this year to be up and running with some communication materials so that we can start sharing what we're doing and draw in the many important viewpoints required. We will be convening the full lab on an annual basis, and we will have evaluation activities running throughout. Then when we think about each of those particular innovation areas that were described on the previous slide, there's a whole set of activities that will go on within each of those innovation areas to help move that work forward from vision right through to implementation. So I've really appreciated this chance to share this ambitious project and this sort of 4-year piece of work that's going to require input from all sectors in Canada. We're very much taking an inclusive and collaborative approach here, and so I just very strongly want to invite a connection if anyone taking in the information from this webinar would like to become involved. My contact information is here. You can also contact us through CBSR. And then I just noted here a couple of resources that can be helpful to watch and to start conversation around if you would find that interesting. So thank you very much for your time, and I really look forward to connecting with you.
Thanks very much, Barb, and thanks also for those additional video suggestions as well. Sometimes that helps bring the information home. It's a lot to digest. It's a dense topic, and I think sometimes when people see things come to life in video form, it's very helpful. So thank you, Barb. Thank you for providing your contact information so people can follow up with you. As you said, for both Agnieszka and for Sara, I want to thank you as well for providing an introduction and context around the protocol itself, which is a much more globally focused initiative, of course. So we're excited to hear what others have to say about the protocol and how that informs the direction from the folks in the UK. Oh wait, is it UK based or is it Sweden?
UK.
UK, thank you. And but if you want to follow up with Agnieszka or with Sara, you can contact us directly at CBSR. I'm happy to put you in touch with them as well. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us on this pre-recorded webinar today. A little bit different for us, but we felt it was important to get this information out there. It's an emerging topic, but things are moving quickly, and more businesses are taking a serious look at this. So thanks for joining us, and we'll hope to see you on our next webinar. Thanks for everybody for joining us. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
And